Over at the agency, the creative director addresses the team at the pre-production meeting for a TV commercial.
So, where are we going to shoot this thing?
We're thinking Spain.
Ah, nice.
Flying first class, like last time. Bottles of Cristal on arrival.
And limos. Black ones.
We'll have 4 choppers at our disposal. Don't worry, we're charging it all back to the job, of course.
Outstanding. Yes. Everyone keep all your receipts. Seriously, keep your receipts.
Wow, have you been working out? I'm just saying.
Darren, the budget sensor's picking up a pretty strong signal over at the agency.
On your boonie, my scientific training tells me there's more to this budget than meets the eye.
Outrageous.
D-Man!
By the power of Caxton!
Here, puss. Bit more P3 power!
You're wasting your time, D-Man. These budgets are as good as spent, bitches!
Fucking kidding himself if he thinks this one's gonna fly.
So, we meet again, D-Man.
Yeah, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but this budget is out of control, and you're creepy. Grr!
Everyone knows caviar and diamonds are necessary for creative flow. Zing, shaka-doom, pata.
Stay away from my
zing,
job.
Evil tree laser! Yes! Ah, shit. Lost it.
A tree's no match for me, sex pest.
You're strong, D-Man, but this should hold you and your budgets back.
No, creative director. Your evil budget-sucking ways can never win over the might and power of P3 and D-Man.
D-Man, your talk at the Caxtons is about to start.
Ah, fuck, that's right. Very well. We'll have to finish this battle over email. What's your email again?
Oh, damn you, D-Man. You know my email. I've told you like 60 million times. Just Facebook me, alright? Just poke me.
Direct from battle, here's D-Man himself, otherwise known as Darren Woolley.
Interesting. I'm not taking my shirt off because I can't live up to that. But it's also interesting for me to see that creative people seem to know my business for TV production assessments, and agency management seem to know me for being a pitch consultant, and yet about 60% of my business is actually agency remuneration. The pitch consulting is probably the thing that gets the highest profile, because the trade press especially just love a good pitch, and we've got a few on at the moment, so you know, I'm sure your managing directors would have briefed you, hopefully, to treat me kindly. Having said that, it was 14 years ago the last time I was at the Caxtons, and I was actually at that stage a copywriter, not a pitch consultant, production assessor, general bastard. And what I've found over the last 10 years, or 11 years of Trinity P3 it is now, is that marketers will constantly ask me, what agency should they be selecting for the big idea? Which agency has the best creative? Who's doing the best work? Because marketers seem to be rightly obsessed with wanting to produce the best possible marketing strategy and marketing creative they can. So I thought it was worthwhile at an event like the Caxtons, and I think it's not unique anymore. I was at Spikes in September. But the idea of having 2 to 3 days for people to get together and actually consider, acknowledge, recognise and discuss creativity is important. So what I want to do is talk about how is creativity valued in the advertising industry. You know, as I said, marketers will tell you that creativity is essential and important, and they're looking for the idea, the creative idea that will transform their business. But is that just lip service? Because we do a lot of remuneration, and looking at what a marketer will spend with a creative agency, digital agency, only 5 to 7% of the total spend is actually for creative. 5 to 7%. The other 93 to 95% is for account management, usually the largest part of the resource in an agency, and production, admin. But the actual creative process, the thing that you guys are here for the next 2 days, recognising, acknowledging, discussing, contributes just 5 to 7% of the total spend. Now we add media into that and it becomes less than 1%. So for every dollar a marketer spends on advertising, less than 1%, 1 cent, goes towards the creative idea, paying for the creative idea. Albert Einstein said genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Clearly people are marketers are more comfortable paying for your perspiration than your inspiration. So in the words of, don't get me wrong, I also agree that creativity is essential. But in the words of Professor Julia Sumner Miller, why is it so? Why is it so? Why are we in this situation where we're happy to pay for production, we're happy to pay for account management, but in actual fact we undervalue, in real financial terms, creativity? Look, it's easy to blame procurement and to blame consultants like myself. It's easy, but the truth is that this started a long time ago. It started in the mid-1800s with a guy called Commodore J. Walter Thompson. If you wonder why it's today called JWT, it's probably because they're trying to distance themselves from a guy who basically, with his cronies, sold media. And he offered creativity, as Ted pointed out earlier, purely as a way to sell more media. They didn't charge for creativity, it was given away free as a way to sell more media. And that's because of the Media Commission. The model for many years was the more media we sell, the more the agency makes. The actual idea was almost secondary in those days, and over time, ideas became the thing that differentiated one brand from another, but ultimately, the way they were paid for was by paid media. In fact, who's a fan of Mad Men? Has anyone noticed that you never ever hear any conversations in Mad Men about remuneration, about agency compensation? It's a wonderful world where agencies and clients get together and they have conversations and they do creative work and no one actually worries about budgets. And it's largely because the Media Commission was a terrific way of actually taking remuneration off the table. But then about almost 20 years ago, there was a fundamental change. And in Australia, it was driven by the AANA and Bob Miller, who was at Toyota at the time, and a guy called Robert Coltai at Colgate-Palmolive, who really drove the change to dismantle accreditation. And in fact, recently I heard Bob Miller talking about this, and he actually regrets making that change. Not regrets dismantling it, but regrets what replaced it. You see, for an incredibly creative industry, we replaced accreditation with the system we have today, which is a cost-based resource model. Does anyone understand the cost-based resource model? Because it's incredibly procurement. I know it's late on Friday afternoon. But what it is we basically take your salary for the year, we divide it by the number of billable hours that we've pre-agreed that you could perform in that year, somewhere between 1,600 and 2,000 hours a year. We multiply it by the agency overhead, often targeted around 100% of your direct salary cost, and then we add a profit margin. This is the same model that's used for accountants and lawyers. They have a multiple of about 3 times. The advertising industry in Australia is running at 2.2. So they obviously have much bigger overheads or make much bigger profits. So it's a cost-based model, and this is the best idea we could come up with. This was the best way of solving dismantling the Media Commission process. In fact, the fact that we do pay accountants and lawyers the same way reminds me of a riddle, so here's a little bit of humour. What does a lawyer, accountant and creative director have in common? Well, lawyers and accountants think they're creative, but the fact is that you can buy all of them for under $500 an hour. Okay, so it's not that funny. What about this one? What does a film producer, music composer, author and creative director have in common? No one? Well, they all think they're creative, but only creative directors get prostituted out by the hour. Okay, so I can see you're a tough audience. Try this one. What's the difference between a merchant banker and a creative director? I can see I've got you stumped. Okay, they both use creative thinking to potentially add millions of dollars in value to their client's business, but only the merchant banker gets to share in the value he creates. It's not funny, is it? But it's true. As an industry, the best we could come up with is a model that rewards agencies for your time and your cost, not the value you create. Now, I know that people are sitting in the audience about this stage thinking to themselves, yeah, but that's not our fault. We didn't do this. It's the clients that won't pay for it. And you're right. I mean, marketers have been complicit in buying a model that works for them. You know, they have a budget. In lieu of getting more budget, what they want to do is get as much done for the budget they have. So they'd much rather a system that almost guarantees the volume of work they can get, and they can get more work for less money. I mean, during the GFC in the last 2 years, we saw budgets cut by 20 and 30% across a lot of accounts, and yet the agencies still produce the same amount of work. It's a pretty good remuneration model if you're a marketer. You could get all of the work you wanted for 20% less. So that's what's wrong with the current remuneration model. It's based on volume and it's not based on quality or value. The more the marketer does, the more they spend, the more their agencies make. That's the way it was with the commission system, and it's still the way it is with the remuneration models we have today. You know, if the marketer does more campaigns, and the idea earlier that John had about test and learn, the more volume of work, the more resources the agency will use, so a claim for greater fees. The more media, even though we've got rid of commission, the more media that's spent, the more resources used by the media agencies, so the greater the fees. There's an absolute driver here to do more. The issue is that the single biggest challenge for marketers today is standing out and cutting through the clutter. So we've got a model that actually encourages marketers, agencies are encouraging the marketers to do more because they'll make more money. And we've got marketers doing more because there's a belief that there's a direct correlation between doing more activity and sales or success. The thing is that 10 years ago, the average person saw 1,500 commercial messages a day, and 10 years today, it's double that. There's a quote, Marty Neumeier's book, Zag, that goes, "Fighting clutter with clutter is like trying to put a fire out with gasoline." And yet the whole process we have in place is actually rewarding people for creating more clutter. Of course, marketers could have, or in some cases develop, a direct correlation between the activities they do and the sales results or value that they create. And if that was the case, then they could possibly use those metrics to find a way to reward their agencies for the value that those activities create. But really, I ask you, if you're a marketer, why would you start sharing your budget with your agency when the agency's already willing to do it at a discount? I know it's not you guys. I know it's not the creative people. It's probably not even the account management people. But it is definitely the agency management people. And the way I know that is because every time we run a pitch, agencies seem hell-bent on discounting their services. And where do they discount them? In the retainer. We'll see lower overheads, lower profit margins, and even in some cases, agencies offering free resources, free executive creative director, going fast, one time only, choose us now. The interesting thing is that CFOs and CEOs have started to focus on marketing. Ted alluded to it before, because it's actually a large cost area. And what they wanted to do was to find out what's actually going on there. So they unleashed a thing called procurement onto marketing. Anyone actually met with a procurement person? You think I'm bad. You should see them. Procurement started looking at marketing, and the first thing they did was that they were looking for the efficiencies. What were the cost opportunities to reduce and remove the waste? The interesting thing, without impacting on effectiveness, every procurement person will tell you that they are there to reduce costs without impacting on effectiveness. But what happens when you're looking at a model that has no measure of effectiveness? All they see is the cost. And in business, the only thing to do to a cost is reduce it. If you're not adding to the top line, you're taking away from the bottom line. So if you think things are bad now, I can tell you they're only going to get worse until we can start to find a way of directly correlating the activities that agencies, both media, creative and digital, and the value that they create. Because while you're a cost, you'll be under continued cost pressures, just as marketers are under continued cost pressures, to do more with what they've got, or sometimes even less. Ironically, under this pressure, agencies have actually responded in the totally wrong way. In trying to accommodate marketers' needs when they're under financial pressure, agencies have tightened the belt too. And what we've seen is agencies dropping their fees to give the clients more. They give away ideas and they give away the thinking, hoping that they'll make up for it with production fees. Invariably, procurement people during the pitch look at what are the retainers, but they don't look at the production rate card. But that's actually changing. Overseas especially, there's a huge trend towards offshoring production. In fact, even some of the agency networks that some of you work for, as we speak, building huge production facilities in India, China, Eastern Europe and South America to do print and digital production. And one of the procurement people I was speaking with only 2 weeks ago said he has an offer on the table to produce print artwork for $1 US a piece out of one of these factories. So in Australia, we've got agencies that are discounting their retainers, discounting their fees to get the work. And overseas, we've got production models that are going to start taking potentially the very large, lucrative part of an agency away and do it much cheaper. So what's the future? Doesn't sound particularly bright. Look, the thing is that if this continues, there's going to be not only an impact on agencies, there'll also be an impact for marketers. Because agencies at the moment, I don't know if anyone saw Ad Age in the last month, but there's been some very high profile, incredibly talented people leave the industry. Because it just gets too hard doing, making up for the shortfalls in resources, working long hours and working on smaller and smaller budgets. Also, agencies are don't have the resources to recruit new talent and train new talent. So there's going to be ultimately a shortage of thinking within the agencies. It could be filled by finding another source. It could be that agencies, Ted's model could be that agencies end up being creative, seems to be part of media again. And perfectly legitimate. So what's the solution? And I'm going to try and leave you with a high, now that I've brought you right down. Okay, I don't know the answer. But last month at Spikes in Singapore, we ran a workshop called Is Creativity Valued? And we had about 50 people. It was a really interesting crowd because we had people from creative agencies in Pakistan, in China, Korea, Japan, Philippines. We had a really great cross-section from across Asia. And we quickly came to the conclusion, talking about the way in all of those countries that creativity is paid for, that as a creative industry, we're not particularly good at actually costing and valuing ourselves. So we started looking at what are the other creative areas in industry that actually seem to have some idea. We looked at the movie industry, motion pictures, publishing, architecture, photography, fashion, and the arts. And each group looked at how do they actually go about the process of being remunerated or rewarded. And there were 4 key insights that I want to share with you, because while I know the cynics in the audience will say, oh yeah, but if you write a book, that's not the same as being commissioned to do a TV ad. But I think these 4 insights are things really worthwhile for agencies, and especially for you to take back to your agency and share. The first one is, in almost every creative industry, the creative idea or the creative is thought of as a product, not a service. It's given a value or a price. It's not charged out by the hour. I don't see Dan Brown sitting there going, yeah, look, it took me about 2,500 hours to write this book. At $150 an hour, that's my fee. He's willing to go for the share of sales. Or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Someone worked out in Terminator 2, he had about 200 and something words, and divide that into his fee, it was about $178,000 a word. But I'm not sure that's how they negotiated his fee either. So it's about getting away from this idea that you're a service provider when it comes to creativity. Sure, production can be a service, but the actual creative idea has to move away from this thought that it's the number of hours you spend on coming up with the idea. I mean, there must be people in this room, because I know it happened with me working in a creative department, that sometimes the idea comes like that, and sometimes it can take days. So why should you be paid by the number of hours you spend on coming up with the idea? Start putting a price on it rather than just how many hours it took. The next one is, in each of these categories, the more distinctive the creator is, the greater the margin they're able to charge, or the premium they're able to charge. You know, why is it, what was the film Edward for Ted? Edward Norton would get paid more than an unknown actor because he's distinctive and he offers unique abilities or unique positioning or unique box office draw. And the same thing happens in agencies. The issue is that there are only 2 or 3 agencies that consistently clients will say to me, we want to run a pitch and we want, and I won't say them, but that we want this agency and maybe this agency. There's maybe 2 or 3 that the marketers know. The rest of the agencies in the marketplace are largely undifferentiated. Many marketers, the saying goes, only know 3 agencies, the one they fired, the one they're with, and one other. So unless you find ways of differentiating yourself and offering something that's distinctive and unique, you become a commodity. And commodity pricing actually goes to the lowest common denominator, which is why during pitches we see people competing on price. The third point was that creative people in other fields use intellectual property like copyright and trademark, not necessarily to hold the buyer to ransom, but to actually demonstrate that their ideas have tangible legal value. Now that's the important thing. Every time I've heard agencies talk about intellectual property, it's because they want to own it and then hold the client to ransom to pay for it. But just the process of going through and protecting your intellectual property, making sure the copyright's on that, adding a trademark. If you invent something, putting a patent on it, the process of doing that means you have to invest money. Investing money actually says to the buyer, we actually value this, rather than just giving it away. And I'm sick of seeing contracts that just assign all IP to the client. You could write a contract that says, yeah, we'll assign all the IP for the work you commission us on, but if we come up with another idea in your category and you didn't commission it, we own the IP. There's nothing that stops this. This is a negotiation. You don't have to roll onto your back, throw your legs in the air and have someone pat your belly every time you go into a negotiation. And that takes me to the final point, which is creative people in all other fields realise that they are the worst negotiators of their own value. So they have a talent agent. I mean, does anyone think if Ari Gold was working in your agency that you'd be discounting your fees? He'd be saying, fuck you, it's $2 million or you can piss off, or $10 million. But for some reason in your agency, there's this mentality that they want to get the business and they'll work out how to make money out of it later. Who's the person in your agency that really values what you do? Can you nominate one person that's actually standing up in these negotiations rather than rolling over? And unless you do that, if you don't value what you do and the agency you work for doesn't value what you do and you don't communicate value to your clients, then be prepared to end up as the lowest common denominator. You know, I started off by saying marketers actually value creativity. So I've got a question for the audience. Hands up, how many marketers are here today? Now put your hand down if you work in the newspaper industry or you're here to speak. Exactly. The only time I've seen marketers turn up to creative awards is if they're in the south of France and there's a free trip attached to it. Why is it that everyone wants to go to Cannes but no one actually wants to stand around and talk about creative? Look, I'm not saying, as I said up front, it's not that marketers don't value creativity. They are emotionally passionate and rationally committed to creative, but their behaviour says that the current model we have, they don't want to pay for it because they don't have to. So who's at fault? I'll let you decide. Thanks very much.